Hello folks, welcome to the session about Azure for the web frontend developers. This is a very special session. We'll have 0 slides, we'll only do technical demo. And you see, to not create the slide even for the session title, I just use a service called sessionize.com where I normally put all the information about sessions I deliver. So Azure Cloud for the web frontend developers and purely technical demo. I'm Maxim Salnikov and today's session will start from the URL. I ask you all to open aka ms SWA demo or just follow my migration. What do you see here? First, let me introduce myself. I work in Microsoft Norway and I do developer engagement. That means I take care of all technical folks in our country and in particular in Oslo where I live to make sure that they have all the latest and greatest information about our Microsoft's cloud offering, Azure, and they can succeed with this cloud. You can always reach out to me at my Twitter, webmaxru. I'm super open for your questions and will be happy to meet you there. In my spare time, I organize user groups, meetups, conferences. 2 conferences I can mention, NG, Vikings, and Mobile Era. I do lots of technical speaking, and you can invite me to speak for your event. Today's URL, one more time, aka.ms/swa-demo, and let's start. Let's talk about cloud as web front-end developers. When we build our next application using JavaScript, TypeScript, of course HTML, CSS, do we often think about where finally these files will end up? Maybe not that often, and maybe in many companies there are special departments responsible for CI, CD flows, responsible for hosting. I'm not saying that it's something wrong, no. I just want to give you tools to do majority of these tasks yourself without too much hassle, really. So just imagine, you do not only write the code, but you have very convenient tools to have this code pushed into the cloud in a very convenient, flexible, and powerful way. From the repo to the global infrastructure. Azure Static Web Apps Service is exactly about this, exactly about simplifying all this journey. And let's first open this official landing page of this service on azure.microsoft.com. You'll find all this marketing-ish bullet points. Why is that cool? I can tell you. First, it automates all the flow from GitHub repo to the ready to go, ready to be served application. And it's not just hosting, it's hosted over global infrastructure. So it's hosted on multiple servers by default around the world without any extra efforts from your side. And of course, it's super scalable and that's super streamlined and contains lots of useful helpers for you. Let's go through some of them in today's session. Without any waiting, let's open GitHub repo I want to use today. We can close some tabs. We do even step back. We open the code, right? It all starts with code editor, after all. Some place where we build, where we write our code. And for today's demo, I created super simple Angular application. Basically, it's not far from official scaffold page when you create a new application. Angular, this is just one of multiple frameworks supported by Azure Static Web Apps, and all major frameworks are there. All custom frameworks you create yourself are also supported. Framework-less applications are also supported. Pretty much everything what you can call a static front-end application. But again, for the sake of simplicity, I just go for Angular because I mainly work with this framework. Let's imagine that we have this application on our local machine, and here is the code. And what happens if we type ng build? This is a command for building of our distribution folder for Angular app by Angular CLI. For React, this is like their own command, and for all other frameworks, you know what to do, right? To create some files we want to propagate on the server. In most cases, they are somewhere in dist folder or build folder, or like names are different. In case of Angular, by default, this is dist plus the name of the project, SWA Angular. So basically, this is the set of files ready to be placed somewhere in the cloud and ready to be served by some static web server. And by the way, ng build is not a production build, it's a debug build, but it's good for our test purposes. So it's, let's say, it's not super optimized, super minified code, but again, for us, this is fine. How to mimic all this behavior on the cloud, and plus how to make these files hosted on the servers on the global infrastructure of Azure. Let's just do it. We can close this page. We can open corresponding service in Azure portal. Let me log in. This is me. The service we will use today, called, as I mentioned, Static Web Apps. Maybe I will call this for simplicity SWA. Don't mess with PWA, my favorite part of front-end applications these days. SWA, Azure Static Web Apps. Let's create a new one. And yeah, by the way, if you have experience with Azure and Azure Portal in particular, you know what to do, right? You just find corresponding service here and create a new one. If you are completely new to Azure, if you don't have any account, just go to azure.microsoft.com/free and register a free trial. You'll get some dollars on the account. You can use it for pretty much majority of the services, and plus many services, like 25 something, will stay for free forever for you. So it's why not to start your cloud journey. But we are at the point of creating a static web application. We choose subscription, resource group. This is a way to group our Azure workloads. Let's give it a name. Let's call this SWA test. Region is not that important currently. And by the way, this static web app service is currently in preview mode. That means it's completely free. Even if you have Azure account and if you have some credits on this account, this experiment will cost you nothing currently. So yes, maybe one more reason to try this. Then you have to point to your source code repo, and in particular GitHub repo. So you have to sign in. I'm already signed in, so I just click continue. But most likely you will need to enter your login and password and maybe second factor authentication here. And then you just pick the repo. First you choose your organization on GitHub, then repo itself. It's quite easy to find it, and branch. Let's experiment with a branch called main today. It's almost done, almost, because we need to provide a bit extra information for SWA for build our application and to deploy it in a proper way. And Azure engineers created very handy set of presets for us. Again, these are just presets. This is definitely not full list of what supported. Plus, we always have possibility to have completely custom configuration, and yeah, that means that static web app is not only attached to particular frameworks. Absolutely not. These are just handy presets. If we check Angular, first, application. This is where the source code of the application resides on your GitHub repo. In majority of the scenarios, this will be just root folder like for me. But for example, if you have a big monorepo project with many sub projects, maybe you keep your front-end part of the app in particular folder, but not in my case. API location, this is where we want to call our APIs from. We keep this part of static web app a bit out of scope of today's session. Maybe I'll say only a couple of words about how that works. So let's just keep it as is for now. And this is very important part, app artifact location. This is actually where you expect to see the output of build of your framework of choice or your own framework, or where you just, if you don't have any framework and not any build processes, if it's just a static index.html page, just point the folder where it resides. If you remember, in case of Angular, this is a folder like this, and this is wrong project, by the way. In my case, this will be dist/sw Angular. In case of framework, at least majority of the scenarios, you do not commit this output of build to your repo, right? This is something that we want to build ourselves on local machine if we test it locally, or we want to ask Azure Static Web App to build it for us from source code. And to do it, of course, Azure Static Web App has to create environment, has to install Angular CLI if it's Angular, has to do npm install, and only then run the build. I think we are ready to go. Let's create it. This will take only a couple of seconds. Initialize deployment, and it will start creating resource immediately. Oh, it's so fast. Go to resource. What's here? On the left hand side, you see pretty much all standard things for Azure resources, like subscription and the resource group. This is what we are interested in. First, we got URL to test, and yeah, of course, maybe this is not the URL to go with for production. You see, this is just a random set of words plus random hash string, but still something to start with. Unfortunately, if we open it right now, it says the app is ready, it's waiting for your content. You remember that to have something here, we want to ask Azure Static Web Apps to build it first. And it's exactly happening right now, and we can check it. First, which tool do we use to build? We use a feature of GitHub called GitHub Actions. Luckily, we don't have to set up anything. This initial scaffolds is happening completely in automatic mode, but you will see, don't be surprised, you will see one file created in your repo after you configured this Azure SWA after you pointed to your repo, and we are going to open exactly this file right now. This is workflow file for GitHub Actions, and it contains configuration for First, when to build your application, which hooks, and then how to build. Do you need to learn and understand every single line of this file which was created automatically for you in .github/workflows folder? Not at the moment. I mean, you can start your static web apps journey without even looking at this file. But of course, if you wish, you can learn more about GitHub Actions. I encourage you to do this. Plus, maybe you need to do some customization. First, you see that all configuration we provided on scaffolding step is here. We can change it when we need. Plus, maybe we, for example, want to change the build command. And by the way, how does SWA understand what to build and which framework to use, or how to use, where is the information about your application? No magic at all. It uses package JSON, and by default it runs npm build command, so no magic here. And we can check for Angular. Again, it was created automatically by Angular CLI. In our case, this will be just ng build. So this is what GitHub Actions will run by default. If we need, we can customize this using this workflow file. Okay, maybe it's done. We can always check the progress here in Actions. It's still running, and some artifacts of my previous experiments. You can check the quite long log of what happened, and I can tell you. So it's spinned up environment with Linux, with corresponding version of, maybe zoom out a bit, of Node.js. Then it installed Angular, it installed all packages, and only then it started to run ng build. After all, it compiled all the files, and where are the green lines? Copied everything to our test URL. And now we can refresh it. Bam! It's actually exactly the same app you've seen already. It's what I host as at aka.ms/swa-demo, like this. What's next? First, it might sound like a bit like a toy, right? You just point to the repo, you have everything in production in a few minutes. But what if your flow is a bit more complex? What if you want to test it, test your updates, test your changes in the code, in the application before you have it in production, on production URL on mysuperwebsite.com if you attach the corresponding domain. That's possible, and staging environments are for your help. Let's give another try. Let me go back to my repo and let me do some simple change. Let me change to branch called main. We work with this one now. If we go to source folder, index.html, let's change the title. Let's do it very quick and dirty. Let's just have it test2. Like this. And we might want to create a new branch. Let's keep this default name, webmax review patch 3. Propose changes. Let's open pull request. Bam. That's it for now. What happens? You see that Azure Static Web Apps started to work, and thanks to this workflow file, we have one more hook on creating pull request. What is happening now? Now, absolutely same process. GitHub Actions are building this application. Again, recreating environment, installs all packages, etc., etc. But you see, this is just a pull request. This is not something we want to see on our super duper Mongo Pebble URL. No, we want to preview this, maybe run end-to-end tests. And this is exactly what will happen. For every pull request, you will create, not you, but Azure Static Web App will create a new environment for you. And you will see the full list here right after the successful build. Maybe it will take another minute. You will see it here. And then what next? You decide. If you are happy with this pull request, with how this new URL looks like, you just accept this pull request, you merge this, and Angular SWA will swap staging environment and production environment, and will obviously delete everything in staging environment. If you reject this pull request, if you just close this, it will just kill corresponding staging environment, like forgot. And of course, maybe I forgot to mention the main part of all this flow. Of course, every time you commit your code and push your code to main branch, it's just called main in our case, Azure Static Web Apps will build your application and put it as simple as that. So literally, you as front-end developer, you write your code, you commit, you push, done. You see changes right after a few moments needed to build your application on this test URL. Or if you create corresponding branch, corresponding pull request, you see corresponding staging environments. Super convenient. Takes as few actions as ever needed from your side. So let's check if it's still running. Yes, still building, and you see my previous experiments add something to the overall picture. Okay, by the way, how to connect your custom domain? You just go here. We'll not do this now, but it's quite straightforward. You just use your domain name provider, and that's as simple as it looks here. Let's talk about more helpers we have. So this one is almost done. So don't be confused by this red process. This is something again from my previous experiments. This one is important. And if we go back to environments, we see it here. So this is name of the pull request. And if we open the website, you see this is test2, and the URL is different. It's still same Mongo Pebble something, but with some random number. If I close this pull request now, and I want to do it now to keep everything in order. Believe me, but this staging environment will be just killed. Next, I want to introduce some extra helpers for you. Let's talk about how single page applications work. We have single page, right? This is why they call it SPAs. Index.html, and all the URLs we have in our application are actually virtual. For example, my super website com/company, there is no folder company with another index.html, right? If it's classical SPA. So we need to let web server know that this, when user types something after our host name, this is not a mistake. We don't have to show 404 to this user. We have to redirect everything to index.html, and then the router of framework will take control over this. And by the way, of course, this is not applicable for statically generated websites, which is more or less new trend, and all these tools like Gatsby, Scully, 11t, Hugo, tons of other frameworks, they literally recreate all the structure with corresponding folders and files. Another interesting way to build frameworks, right? And of course, it's also supported by SWA. Azure. But let's go back to classical SPAs. How to explain to Azure Static Web Apps that we have to redirect everything to index.html, or maybe redirect this particular URL to another particular URL. Maybe we have something custom. There is a helper called file routes.json, and let me demonstrate you how that looks. Let me go back to the code, SW Angular. Let's make sure that we are on branch called main. And you have to make sure that routes.json will end up in the root folder of what you have in your dist folder. But in case of frameworks, Azure SWA is smart enough to recognize it in a particular folder. There is a list of location you expect in particular framework. It will be copied automatically. For Angular, it might be placed in SRC assets, the normal place where you keep your static assets for your application. The file itself looks like this. The main and required set of the lines is this one for single page applications. So what we say here, please take all the URLs we have, and this is why we have wildcard, and serve root index.html for all of these virtual URLs. And explicitly we also say please show status code 200. It goes by default, but here I decided to show it explicitly. Like, for example, the URL /me is not an error, it's something that you have to just redirect to index.html. And this is how that works. So let's give it a try again to make sure that it just works. Thanks to where's this file? Thanks to this particular section of routes.json, we have this virtual URLs of SPAs are working. And if we want to check the documentation, I think it's here. So on this list, I gathered most relevant sections of the documentation. By the way, documentation of static web apps is really cool. I love how that works, and I encourage you to use this. So you see locations for particular frameworks where you might want to have this routes.json for it to be copied automatically for you, but you can always do it yourself. Let's move on. Next helper, authentication. We as I can open corresponding session. We as front-end developers quite often work with building some authentication mechanism for our applications, right? And there are tons of different helpers, libraries, utilities, services to help us, and Azure Static Web Apps is one of them. So it exposes a very convenient way for you to authenticate your users using these providers, these identity providers: Azure Active Directory, GitHub, Facebook, Google, and Twitter. In my experiments, I will use GitHub. And it all starts with the knowledge about particular magic URL. Is it mentioned somewhere here? Yes, it's called system folder, and it's this one, .os. So this is a virtual folder, and every Azure Static Web App has the one, and it basically authentication helper. If we so you see, to redirect folks to do login with particular identity provider, you just expose this URL, and let me just test it on my application. If we keep it here, something that I didn't expect to see. That's interesting. Okay, let me check another URL. Of course, you see, It's just a confirmation that the staging environment was killed, because this is actually non-existing URL anymore at all. This is where it all starts. I think I'm already authenticated to my GitHub account. This is why it doesn't ask me my credentials, my login and password and the second factor authentication. So I just give consent, and basically I'm back to the application. You see that visually nothing happened, right? But if we go and check another URL of this system folder, auth/me, this is different. You see, it understands the role. It called the role anonymous is always present, and this one is authenticated. Plus, it has my handle of GitHub account. And if we open the same URL in a private window where I guaranteedly do not authenticate it, you'll see, of course, this information is not here. Okay, so we know how to log in, right? If we type another magic URL in system folder, auth/logout, will be logged out. And now if I have actually the URL called check status, auth/me. Yes, we logged out now. How to hide all this complexity with virtual folder, so we don't want to expose these URLs at all, right? Using the same Routesjson, and I have it in my example. You see, for example, I say, hey, Azure static web app, please use this URL/login, but actually serve this one, and it should work the same. I type this virtual URL, login, and yeah, you see nothing because it remembered my consent and my credentials, but just to make sure that we logged in, yes, it happened. How to use this functionality in your logic, or in the logic of your application? Well, you always have an access to this virtual URL .auth/me, and basically from your code you can always check if the user authenticated or not. Plus, you can again utilize power of Routesjson, because you can protect some routes right here. And you see, I decided to protect route called /profile with role called authenticated. And basically this is any authenticated user without any custom role. Another example, I decided to protect route called /admin with the role administrator, and this is custom role, and I want to explain you how to create this one. And of course, if we again open this URL in yeah, let's give it a try. Let's open profile. Remember that we authenticated. Oh, lovely bone. Oh, it's completely old URL. I don't even know how it ended up here. Profile. Yes, so it works, but because we have this role called authenticated, right? We just authenticated. But if we open admin, another picture, because we didn't assign this customized role administrator to our user, to me. How to do this? You go back to portal, you go to role management, and you invite someone to be an administrator or any other custom role. So in that sense, administrator, this is just a custom name of the role I created. It could be just admin, it could be moderator, it could be super user, whatever. I just decided to be not too creative and call this role administrator. And I want to create to assign this role to the user. Administrator. This is my email address, and the authentication provider I use GitHub. Of course, yes. Then in case of GitHub, it's a handle. Role administrator. Hopefully no typo. Generate. And you send this link to a particular person whom you want to be administrator, basically to this person. Let me open this link right here. I'm as potential administrator accepted, and again, most likely you'll see authentication window plus consent window. But now let me double check. If we have administrator, yes. So you see, after giving permission to this particular user, we got one extra here. And this way we can protect this particular route called admin. Okay, folks, let's wrap up. Let me open our application again. So we went through basic connection of your GitHub repo to this Azure Static Web Apps. Then we understood how the pre-production environments are working. Then we got some practical experience with creating Routesjson file. Went through authentication, regular and custom role scenarios. What's left behind is creating API. Just a couple of words. You can create API using Azure functions, using languages JavaScript, TypeScript, C# and Python currently for Azure Static Web Apps, to have them as a first-class citizens of your web frontend app. No CORS issues, plus you can use the same authentication mechanism. Of course, in that case, you will check the permission and the role in the headers of HTTP request in your call of API. But it's a very good developer experience to work with APIs attached to front-end applications using Azure Static Web Apps. The page is here for you. Let me remind this URL, aka.ms/sw-demo. Thank you very much, and let's stay connected. Just ping me on Twitter. Maxim Salnikov was here. Bye bye.